everyone. This is Alexia. Thank you so much for joining today. I'm so happy to see so many of you. We have a lot on our agenda today, so we're going to go ahead and just jump right in. So as always, my name is Alexia Kemmerling. For a quick digital description, I'm a young white woman. My hair is long and wavy. I have on a multicolored sweater and clear glasses, and my pronouns are she and her. And before I introduce our guests today, I'm just going to review our access features. So we do have Karp captioning available. You can see it if you click the CC button on your bottom toolbar, or if you want to view it in a separate window, you can click the stream text link, which our lovely AAPD's tech support April will put in the chat. We also have our interpreters, Amy and LaDonna today. They will remain spotlit throughout. If you can't see them, please message AAPD tech support or put it in the chat and we'll make sure to get that fixed for you. In general today, we'll try to keep our chat usage at a minimum just because it can become distracting for attendees who are using screen readers. If you do need to use the chat to communicate, you can do so, and myself or April will read it out loud for you. Otherwise, you can feel free to use the raise hand feature if you have a question or comment, and then we'll call on you to come off mute. Today, we do also have a couple of quick breakout room activities. So if you requested captions or interpreting when you registered, you will be in a breakout room with that access feature. We also will have our speakers and a couple of AAPD guest staff be in some of the breakout rooms. They're just there to help answer questions or facilitate. So I'll introduce our other AAPD staff member who is on today's call, which is Gabi, and they are one of our program managers at AAPD. Gabi, you can wave. I put you
Hi,
in spotlight.
this is Gabi. Should I share or let you go? Okay, great. I am a program manager. A quick visual description. I am a young, brown-skinned person with a medium-length, wavy, dark brown hair and green glasses. I'm wearing a gray-ish, oatmeal-colored cardigan. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Gabi. Also, I totally did not tell them that I was going to have them introduce themselves, so sorry for putting you on the spot, literally. Um, okay, so today I am super excited to introduce our guest speakers who are from the Center for Artistic Activism. And they are going to be sharing some creative strategies with us that I'm hoping we can all use as we're thinking about Disability Voting Rights Week. As most of you know, Disability Voting Rights Week is a national celebration that happens the second week of September. So it's September 8th through 12th this year. And it is about building civic engagement in the disability community, and working to improve election accessibility and really taking the time to engage and celebrate our communities. Last year, there were over 300 events in 33 states during Disability Voting Rights Week. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to take some more time with all of you to think about how we can make our events even better each year and think of new ideas together. So I will go ahead and pass it over to the C4A team.
Thank you, Alexia. Hi, everyone. My name is Krystal Barett. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the programs manager at the Center for Artistic Activism. And to give you a visual description, I have olive skin. I have dark and pink curly hair that's about, to my shoulders almost, or a little higher. I have dark glasses on, and I am wearing a black and white striped vest today that I just recently got and I'm really excited about. And I am just so excited to be here with all of you and to pass it over to my colleague Rachel.
Hi, I'm Rachel, she, her. For visual description, I'm a pale-skinned woman with brown chin-length hair and bangs, and I am wearing a red, white, and purple striped sweater. And I am the programs director at the Center for Artistic Activism. And if you're wondering, well, what is the Center for Artistic Activism? We can dive right in and tell you.
Yeah, so we are a nonprofit that's been around since 2009 when we've been able to work around the world with thousands of folks. And we do different trainings and workshops like this one today. We offer lots of research on what works in activism, and then we offer a lot of resources as well, some of which we will share with you today. And we're part of a much larger group that has worked on a whole range of issues.
Yeah, some of those issues have been things like fair districting, LGBTQIA plus rights, youth incarceration. We've had the pleasure working with Alexia quite a bit at AAPD. And we trust the people we work with to be the experts on the issues that they're working on. And what we bring is an expertise in creative activism so that you can get the expertise in both your issues and the things that we can provide.
And we have worked, again, all over the world. And some of those places include all the way from North Carolina to Atlanta, Georgia, to Australia and Indonesia and the Netherlands and beyond. But we've been able to work with so many folks online as well. And just lots of hundreds of folks, in person, different workshops and in fellowship programs.
Yeah. So we might be ready to work with you, maybe. And so this is an overview of what we're going to do today. We're going to share our activism origin stories, get inspired by examples of creative actions, learn how to build a creative campaign, create audience personas, and provide resources. But before we dive into that, we just want to acknowledge the moment that we're in, which is ever harder. And so something that we've been trying to do is check in with each other more, and even at the start of a meeting, just share in a word or two how we're feeling. And it's a very large group to do that. But if anyone wants to share anything about how they're feeling in this moment, you can raise your hand or come off mute or otherwise put that into the space. Krystal, is there anything to call on you to start? Is there anything you want to share in this moment?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna take a word from someone that we had a meeting with earlier today, and that word is frazzled. And not necessarily frazzled to be here with you all, because this is, I think, grounding me. But it's just a frazzling time, I guess, and a pretty difficult time to be doing the work that we all do.
For sharing that. I have been exceptionally tired this week, and I think it's just the pace of everything going on. And we want to acknowledge those feelings, but also share, and whatever you all, the 50 other folks here might be feeling. But the reason why we're here is to try to change those feelings, to try to bring some new strategies to the work that we're doing so that we can have more success and replace the very heavy feelings that we have now with much more positive ones. So with that, let's dive in.
Yeah, so as Rachel said, we're going to start by sharing activist origin stories. We're going to put everyone in breakout rooms in a moment to share your name, your pronouns, and what we're calling your curb cut moment. And so on the screen here, we have an image of a Black man in a manual wheelchair, and they are waiting at the edge of a sidewalk. In front of him is a curb cut and tactile paving signifying entry into the street. And so we want you to think again about your curb cut moment. It's inspired by an old activist term, and we're using it to describe when you went from maybe watching to observing to acting, when you move from being on the sidewalk to being on the street, so to speak. Like, kind of what made you move? What was that moment for you? We want you to take a moment to think about that. And Alexia, we're wondering if you would be willing to share your curb cut moment.
Alexia, sure, I would be happy to share my curb cut moment. So many folks on this call probably know that I am hard of hearing, so I was born with my disability and have always navigated the world as a disabled person. But I was not exposed to disability community broadly when I was growing up, and I started to really want that space when I was in middle school and high school. And so I started volunteering at a local disability community center in my hometown, teaching independent living skills to folks at that program. And I did not know much about the program when I started there. I was just looking for any type of disability connection that I could find. And I made a lot of friends in the program and really bonded with people there. But after just 3 weeks of working with one woman, her name was Manya, she had completely mastered the skill that her goal was for. And so Manya and I asked the program leads if we could create a new goal. And they said no. And everything that we proposed, they kept shooting down our ideas, even though it was really clear that Manya was interested in doing something else. And that is how I learned that the place that we were was a sheltered workshop, and that things that were meant to be brief trainings were actually spaces where disabled people were stuck doing the same tasks and working on the same work goals for decades, and getting paid sub-minimum wage. And that was like a really stunning experience for me of seeing people that I connected to, related to, um, being given really extreme barriers for no reason other than just having a disability. And it really made me very angry. And since then, I have not stopped being engaged in disability advocacy.
Thank you for sharing, Alexia. We really appreciate that. And we do want to add, sometimes your curb cut moment can be from a long time ago, and there is the saying that some people are just born off the curb, that you kind of didn't even have a choice to do the curb cut. So it is something, though, that formed your view of the world, what it could be, and what needs to change, kind of like how Alexia was describing. So again, we're asking what your moment was. You're going to go into the breakout rooms in a moment, and again, share your name, pronouns, and your curb cut moment. You do have about 1 minute each to share, so please make sure everyone gets to share. And if for some reason you want to say more to each other, hopefully that will create a connection where you can connect back later and talk more about your stories. We can go ahead and go into the breakout rooms now. All right. Hi, everyone. This is Krystal Barett again. Welcome back from your breakout rooms. We just wanted to know, like, what came up in there. Does anyone want to share briefly for a moment?
So what came up in the breakout room for me was when I was a kid, um we had two middle schools in the area where I lived, And as they were building a new school on the section of the county where I live, the the parking spaces weren't marked accessible on the sidewalk. So parents had to advocate for for curb cuts so that the wheelchair users could get into the new new middle school where I live.
Oh, thank you for sharing, Mark. And it looks like we have Holden has their hand raised.
That's right. So for ours, we were mainly just sharing like our past experiences. I was telling them about my curb cut moment being like when I was a teenager and dealing with the educational system. Unfortunately, I was very much depressed and had very low motivation at the time. So that was definitely a struggle for me. And that's when I realized that, I definitely had a disability. And my parents had told me I had Asperger's before, but I hadn't ever thought about it until really that point when I realized, um, that I would need additional support in some areas. And the others talked about like their experiences as well. One of them had experience working in all different fields of disability advocacy, which was very impressive. And it'd probably be cool to hear from them as well. But unfortunately, I will need to head out in a few minutes because I have a consumer meeting to get to. But I just wanted to say that right quick.
Thank you, Holden. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and Rachel, you want to take it away from here?
Sure. I got to hear some lovely curb cut moments as well in my breakout room, but since we didn't hear everyone's, we just wonder if anyone described any of these things as their curb cut moments. So did anyone mention signing a petition? I'm going to take silence as a no. Receiving a pamphlet, reading a report, watching a press conference, reading a news story. None of those came up in my room. Watching a webinar, going to a lecture, going to a meeting, getting an email forward, or watching something on social media like an Instagram reel.
Those didn't come up in my room either.
Yet, are you saying that all of those came up? We got a yes in the chat, but yeah, so maybe for some of you it came up, but usually I think those don't come up because Krystal and I have done this exercise with people all over the world. And that list was all examples of things that are part of a successful campaign. Oh, you have, yes. So all of those things, like signing a petition or reading a report or getting a pamphlet, those are all things that we've all done, and they're probably all parts of advocacy campaigns that we've run. And if you ran a campaign and you got people to sign a petition or go to a lecture or a meeting, like you might think, great, my campaign is successful, but there's a disconnect, right? Because these stories that we were sharing about what got us into this work are not those things. They're not signing the petition. They're not reading the story. Right. The stories that I heard in my breakout room that I can identify, they are tied to really profound experiences. There are a lot of emotions usually involved in them. And the stories that I heard were very affective. They were related to like feelings in the gut. Yeah, Krystal, take it away.
Yeah, as Rachel was saying, like everyone kind of has different stories of their curb cut moment, but they all share that they're experiential, emotional, and effective. Like, again, that feeling in your gut that you can't put into words, that feeling when feel moved. Um, the problem, though, like Rachel was saying, for traditional activism is that how most activists reach out to others is through things like the list before, the petitioning, flyering, lecturing, fact sheets. Someone in the chat said, attended a training I did not want to be at, things like that. Um, but luckily, and one reason we're here today is there's a practice of communication and persuasion that's been around for about 45,000 years that is experiential, emotional, and affective, and that is art. So art creates experiences, it stimulates emotion, it generates affect, again, that feeling in your gut that you can't put into words. And this is why artistic and creative activism is so important. And you might be like, well, wait, well, like art, creativity, I'm not an artist, like I can't draw, I can't paint. Or you might be thinking about the very real advocacy goals you have and upcoming campaign objectives you're trying to achieve. And you might be thinking, like, I don't have time for art. But really, this is not a replacement for the advocacy techniques. It's a way to add, augment, and expand. And we've seen it be far more effective and successful than traditional campaigning alone. Everyone is creative, and innovations are what move our work forward. And this gives us a lot of latitude to work within.
Great. And so if you're like, well, what really is creative activism? One of the best things to do is to share some examples about what we mean, campaigns that have had real direct impact and used more creative methods to achieve them. And so we're going to share just a couple examples. It's just to give you a little bit of a taste. The examples are not comprehensive. And as we go through, we'll pull out some key takeaways that you can apply to your own work. Some things to keep in mind, 3 important lessons as we share these examples. One is that these won't work for you. We're not saying to copy these campaigns because context matters, of course. And the only reason why these campaigns worked is because who made them, when they made them, where they made them, who they made them for, which will never be the same as the work that you're doing. But there's an idea that creativity comes from combination. And so there might be an element of one of these examples that sparks something for you. And so with that, we'll dive in.
So our first example takes us to the Western Balkans, where the Center for Artistic Activism has done a lot of work in, specifically in a country called North Macedonia. It's part of the former Yugoslavia in Eastern Europe. And on the screen, we have an image showing an aerial view of North Macedonia. It's the city, lots of buildings with the sun setting over mountains on the skyline. And some of our colleagues in North Macedonia went into rural areas to share contemporary art. But the people in North Macedonia were not interested because they said our town is falling apart, potholes are everywhere. On this slide, we have some images of roads filled with deep, wide potholes. The asphalt is crumbling around them. And so the folks in the town were like, that's what we need from you is help with this. They were turning to the artists because the problem wasn't being solved by the government. And the folks there had already tried those avenues. There was so much corruption in the country, though, and it just felt a part of everyday life. People were extremely apathetic and cynical, and they thought protest was pointless. So our artist colleagues knew that the government would respond to public pressure if they could create it. But how would they get people who are feeling so apathetic and cynical to fight corruption and to protest? Well, they decided to hold a fishing contest. And so on the screen, we actually have some folks in full fishing gear, full fishing garb. They are sitting in front of one of the biggest potholes I've ever seen in my life. It looks like it's just a street. So in the photo, you can see this huge long pothole filled with water. Um, People would come over and ask, what are you doing over here? And they would say, we're holding a fishing contest. And if someone asked if they had caught anything, they would say yes and point to this orange bucket that is at the bottom of this photo. And they had actually brought a fish with them and put it in the bucket. I see some laughing emojis going on. So it was pretty ingenious. Everyone loved it. North Macedonia is a smaller country, so it was covered in the news, and the pothole was actually fixed. So a takeaway we get from this is to create irresistible experiences and imagery. Sometimes we tell people to think about what's that photo that you want on the front page of the newspaper when your action is wildly successful. And you can create that. You can make it yourself, or you can make that picture, that experience that you want everyone to see. And we've been a part of actions where someone did something bold, wore a funky costume, or many people did a surprising collective thing together, and you just see all the press and the cameras flocking to capture that. You can plan for that and you can create it. They did another take on this with huge potholes that were outside of schools. And so in these photos, we have some big potholes outside of a school, and there's rubber duckies floating around in the potholes. That's all they did. They put some rubber ducks in the potholes. You can see some kids in one of the photos. They're playing with the rubber ducks. The cars started to avoid the puddles, and they took photos and spread them on social media. Karen, I love that you're just laughing at all of these. It is really funny, these ideas that they did. And so a takeaway we have from this is simple works. Something very small, very low cost, rubber duckies, can be extremely effective. And so 3 days later, the road was fixed outside of those schools. And these photos, we have those same areas where the potholes were, and they are completely paved over. And they started doing all of these different projects in different towns, and they were so popular that mayors started calling them and asking, are you coming to our town? Like, what do you want us to do? Just don't come. Like, we'll do whatever you want. It was very effective. And they estimated that all of their projects have instigated over 15 million euros worth of infrastructure projects. And so another takeaway we get from this example is to change the culture. Culture and policy change side by side. To change corruption, yes, we absolutely need to change laws, but we also need to change the culture around it. And so North Macedonians no longer believed that nothing could be done. They felt that if they pushed, they could win, and that change was possible. And that's exactly what happened.
This is Rachel with the next example, a campaign called How's Your Voice Gonna Matter If You Don't Vote? I'm bringing us back home to the United States. And this is a campaign we worked on with some partners in Pennsylvania. On the screen are the logos of two of those partners, PA Youth Vote and Just Act. And back in the year 2021, these two groups based in Philadelphia, they were trying to get the Philadelphia School Board to pass a resolution called the Student Voter Education and Registration Resolution. And so every year, about 8,000 students in Philadelphia graduate, and this resolution would have helped those students get registered to vote and also get the education they needed to know why their vote mattered and the encouragement to vote. And the groups had tried very traditional activist methods, and they weren't getting anywhere. This resolution had stalled out. And then they tried something much more creative. And on this slide is actually what Krystal was talking about before, like the image that you want on the newspaper after your action was really successful. So there's this screenshot of a local newspaper, and there's an image of a group of Black student organizers standing in front of the school district of Philadelphia. And the students are wearing these matching blue shirts, and they're holding signs that say PA Youth Vote. And this is another photo on the next slide of the action. So the more creative action that these groups tried when we were working with them was that the students developed an interactive performance all about voting called How's Your Voice Gonna Matter If You Don't Vote? And in this photo, you see another shot of the performance in front of this Philadelphia school board building. The students are dancing, they're holding colorful signs. There's a student wearing like a post office box to get at the mail-in voting. There's another person wearing a voting booth curtain. There's a top hat. And then there are some folks in the background watching. And those are school board members. So the students actually went to the school board building and performed outside on the school board's lunch break, so that when the school board members went outside for lunch that day, they were met with this amazing display of student passion for getting this resolution passed. And so about 6 months later, they actually passed the resolution after it had been stalled out for about 3 years. And one of our partners had this to say, that the performance, which had happened over the summer in August, really had a big impact. The board members that came out to watch that day got busy. Before that, it had been completely stalled. And we have a little video of some of the people involved talking about it.
Oh no.
There's a screen that came up that wants Krystal to sign in to prove she's not a bot. And I know that she's not a bot. Anyway, we'll put the link to the video in the chat. But you get a sense of what the action was already. And the takeaways from the example are to go to where the power is. And you can, for every action, who's in power will be different. But it was just very smart for the students to just go directly to the school board to do this performance, not to do the performance at a theater or somewhere and like ask the school board members to come, but just like to bring it to them. Another takeaway is to start with a really strong, clear objective, and we'll come back to that in the second half of our time together. But these groups knew exactly what they wanted to happen. They wanted to get this resolution passed, and they planned a whole campaign specifically around that. And the last takeaway for this example is to use spectacle and surprise. Can you imagine, like, you're at work somewhere, you go outside for lunch, and there's this performance happening that's made like just for you? That'd be very surprising. Say there's like, it's colorful, it gets your attention, it uses spectacle, and that is a really great way to connect with people and achieve success.
Thanks, Rachel. And we have one more example. Hopefully I do it justice to Alexia, because this is an example of an action that she created. So as we mentioned earlier, Alexia, we worked with her last year. She was a fellow with us, and she has been focusing on making polling places accessible. Advocacy orgs usually educate poll workers through uninspired methods like fact sheets or very traditional kinds of tabling. But Alexia knew this kind of approach is only overwhelming to overworked poll workers. So it doesn't really work. It makes them shut down, and it's much too boring to get them to want to engage. And on the screen here, we have a zine that Alexia created that we'll get more into, but it says, "Be an accessible democracy ally." And it's very colorful and bright. And below it are pins that say "Accessible Democracy Ally" on them. So Alexia had an opportunity to engage hundreds of poll workers in Virginia, and she decided she wanted to take this opportunity for tabling and turn it from traditional tabling, which can kind of be boring. Like, we have a sloth here on the screen yawning. So Alexia is going from tabling to tabling, like the most exciting tabling. We have someone dancing on the screen here, just very excited and engaging. So how did she do it? She really thought about the before, the piquing interest. And so on the screen here, we have different flyers that Alexia created, all in comic book themed. That one of them says, "In a world where every vote counts, who will emerge to guard democracy and champion accessibility? Find the comic theme table in the lobby." And then there's other signs that are kind of directing folks in this comic book themed way to Alexia's table. Again, she made a very fun, colorful, and easy to follow zine that told election officials and poll workers everything they needed to know. Rachel and I got a chance to be there and look through this zine. It's absolutely beautiful and so educational, but again, in like an easy to follow way. On the screen here is some of the inside of the zine and just like talking about emerging as accessible democracy allies. A lot of poll workers, again, feel overwhelmed by trying to understand the different things they need to do around accessibility. But again, in this zine, Alexia laid it all out simply and in a very visually engaging way. And so on the screen, we have some more photos from the zine, asking about, are there headphones? Check. Is there a tactile keypad? Check. And then just different things on how you can become an ally. And it captured people's interests. It got them to slow down and really learn what they needed to know, but also have fun during it. In these photos, we have folks looking at the zine and are really excited to be reading it. And again, I'll say Rachel and I were there. There were some other tables in the area, and not to like knock on them or anything like that, but they definitely were not engaging folks in the same way Alexia was. We had folks flocking over to Alexia's very like colorful comic book themed table. But they didn't only have these zines. They built in all these ways to like level up poll workers' engagement. Once they got the zine, they could play a game where they spun a colorful wheel and got to answer a question about accessibility. And if they didn't know, it wasn't kind of like oh, I'm gonna shame you for not knowing. It was more like, okay, let's talk about this and let's figure this out together, and like a learning and educational opportunity. And here in the photo, we have someone kind of being quizzed and being asked a question about accessibility. And when they got the question right, which they did because we were all there to help them, they got a very special pin that people really wanted. We ended up having folks coming over and saying, like, how do I get this accessible democracy ally pin? And so they got this pin after answering the question. And on the screen is the pin being pinned onto a shirt. And again, it says accessible democracy ally, and it's red, white, and blue and has a comic book theme to it. They could also pose as superheroes. So we have folks standing in front of a very colorful red, yellow, blue backdrop that's comic book themed as well, like a city landscape. And they're holding signs that say accessibility transforms and zap, power the accessible voting machines. So it's just super creative. And they could pose with capes. So this is actually Alexia in the photo, wearing a cape that says Champion of Accessibility, Guardian of Democracy, and some of her colleagues are with her, standing with these capes as well. And so some takeaways we get from this are offer fame over shame. This is something Alexia really wanted to portray in her action. What we were working with was a strategy we've seen be very effective to celebrate people for doing the right thing versus condemning them for doing the wrong thing, and essentially to call them in instead of calling them out. Another takeaway is detailed work demands attention. So Alexia created a whole comic book theme experience for poll workers. There was such detail in every single part of her tabling action, like I've mentioned. And again, you couldn't not approach her area. So we always say, like, think about the detail and what you're doing. What can you add to make your action demand the attention of those who you want to reach? Especially when there may be other tables or actions around that could be competing with their interests. And make it easy to do the right thing. Folks didn't have to jump through hoops or do any strenuous engagement to participate in Alexia's action to become accessible democracy allies. It was easy and it made folks more willing to do it. And then a last takeaway we have is, of course, make it fun. Make it something folks want to do and that you want to do as well.
So this is Rachel again. We shared our takeaways and what we noticed from these examples. But if anyone has any questions or other things that they want to share, we'll just give a moment for that. There's a lot of love for Alexia's action in the chat.
Yeah, Michelle Flood.
So Sammy's created a mock, I guess, election where we would have two candidates going against each other. We call it the Great Sandwich Debate. So it's a mock vote between peanut butter and jelly or a bologna sandwich, for example. And we hold campaign events, and everyone gets to vote and discuss the outcome. This year, they didn't want to do peanut butter and jelly, so peanut butter and jelly went up against a chicken parm sandwich, and chicken parm won this year. And we do it to help people with disabilities be more engaged and see that one vote can make a change.
Love that. Alexia told us about that action, and we're big fans.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Great. Thanks for sharing. So just to remind you, that these won't work for you because the context matters so much. But we're sharing them because creativity can come from combination, and maybe some ideas can spur some thinking for you. And the principles that we pulled out, you really can apply about creating irresistible experiences, keeping things simple, trying to change the culture, bringing your action to where the power is, making sure you have a strong, clear objective, using spectacle and surprise, offering fame over shame, putting a lot of detail into your work and making it easy for folks to do the right thing, and forefronting fun for yourself and for your audiences. Those are things that we've seen work in the examples we showed you and all over the world, in a whole variety of campaigns. And you can even use them as prompts for the work that you're doing. So, Michelle, I don't think your action needs to be changed at all, but say you want to refresh it and you're like, well, is there a way that we could use more spectacle and surprise? You know, and those are just sort of things you could ask yourself if you wanted to. Or if you're just starting out something and you want to say, like, let's make something simple, you can use that as a prompt as well.
And it looks like we have maybe a question or a hand raised. Mark Johnson.
Yes. I think art and street theater has been real helpful to a network of people that I'm involved with. A lot of people think of DAP as only in your face type protest. There's a lot of theater that goes behind it. Years ago, we did a several day sit-in in front of HUD, and we turned it into Dust City. And we had a daily newspaper every morning, and we had a city hall you could go to and register your complaints to. So they were built out of cardboard cities. So I really appreciate what y'all doing around the world, and more than ever, there's a place for it now because people are used to some of the. Protest is here to stay. It's always worked, but being creative like y'all are encouraging people to be is real helpful. I know Lydia's on from Texas, and Lydia has some of the greatest signs you'll ever see, handmade signs. And if the sign itself doesn't get you, her Cheshire cat personality will.
That's so great. Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you for sharing. And Lydia, it'd be great to see those signs one day. Well, thank you all again. And we'd just like to add that a lot of times what's coming on these slides is what people think creative or artistic activism is. It might be that like sometimes an artist comes to an organization and says, hey, I've got this idea, paint a mural about climate change. Or sometimes an organization goes to the artist and says, like, we've got a campaign. Can you make this mural about like reproductive justice? Basically that is making art about an issue or a campaign. And that's not necessarily what we mean. We don't mean art about activism or art with activism as the subject matter. You can make art about any subject. It can be the landscape, color, form, emotions, and you can make art about social issues. And it's great. I've done that myself. But we're talking about using art to get to real political outcomes. And so we also don't mean activism with a little art, which might be like a big march with these different like posters and things or cardboard cutouts, or an activist group that plans a whole campaign and asks an artist to come in at the end and make a song. When we've seen really impactful activism, it's creative to the core. And the powers of art and creativity have been used to make every aspect of it really speak to people. The creativity isn't just added at the end, it's really a part of every element of the campaign. And so this is what we mean when we say artistic or creative activism. And we like to say it's like between those two extremes is a whole world of creative and impactful activism. It's really creative to the core. And these things are also sometimes called innovation, design thinking, creativity. Whatever term works for you and your colleagues is fine, but creativity is required for us to succeed. You can probably think of all the new methods your opposition has employed in recent years or maybe even in recent months, whether that's through refining strategies, novel uses of technology, or clever and devious uses of mis and disinformation. But we're all creative and we are all capable of coming up with innovations. And sorry, I was going to just say, it looks like we have another hand raised. Linda?
Hi, yeah, I love this. And I just wanted to share my experience, which is back related to the curb cut moment as well. I came to really appreciate art for advocacy while working with students, young people with developmental and intellectual and developmental disabilities. And our artist in residence for REV UP Georgia is young Black man with autism. And his art, it turns out, is like a curb cut for democracy, because what works for people with autism or people who can't read, don't like to read, are too busy to read, are all, it kind of levels the understanding and the experience down to the emotional truth of the topic. And that really is an equalizer. So it gives everybody access to the democratic process when voter education is wrapped in art, whether it's drawing or performance. And so that's really the lesson that I've learned in the last year or two, that I love that you all are already like doing it and it's happening all over. I love that.
Thanks, Linda.
Yeah, thank you. And I feel like you can facilitate this next section
Yeah,
that Rachel's about to share. It really speaks to it.
Yeah, this is Rachel again. From even just the examples you've shared, there's been such an amazing range of art. And so we have this slide that has art in quotation marks, because we always like to say, when we say art, we don't mean like capital A art, like the masterwork that you're seeing in a museum or the classical ballet or the Shakespeare play. It's really about using the powers of art in your work. And so that can be in like a peanut butter and jelly versus chicken parm contest, or it can be in the art that Linda was, the drawings that Linda was just describing, or the mock city that we'd heard about earlier. And social scientists have actually studied what the powers of art are, and I'm reading the chat, but I'll finish this and then we'll answer your question, Tina. So just to go through what the powers of art are, which we all know what art is, but just is some maybe nice to draw them out. Art helps people express feelings and ideas that can be difficult to put into words. Linda, that fully aligns with what you were just saying. Art helps people create purpose and meaning. Art can connect people through shared experiences and help situate ideas through personal and relevant stories that resonate. art is really useful for getting people to learn because it can be effective at engaging and distilling complex and dynamic problems. And it can challenge habits and certitude through surprise and cognitive dissonance. It can frame familiar problems in new ways. It can enchant and invite participation. It provides opportunities for synthesis and personal meaning making, and it can engage all of the senses and all of our sense-making capacities. And so if you're running a campaign and you're trying to affect change, you can see how these powers of art can be really useful. Like going back to the example with Alexia, like the election workers, maybe they needed their habits about not making polling places accessible. They really needed that habit to be challenged. And that zine that made it really easy for people to know, like, oh, of course I can make a polling place accessible. That could happen. Tina. In the chat, Tina wrote, can Rachel or Krystal explain the difference between activism and advocacy, being an activist versus an advocate? I'm going to say that that's like a personal definition, and we sort of use them interchangeably. I think that some people really make it different, and we don't as much. I know, Krystal, what would you say?
I would say the same, that at least here at the Center for Artistic Activism, we don't really differentiate the two, and we use them pretty interchangeably.
Yeah.
But there could be, like Rachel said, a personal choice, or maybe there is an exact definition out there of both, and that makes them different.
Yeah, for us, it's like if you are working to make the world better, then we want to work with you.
Yeah. Hopefully that helps, Tina.
Great. Yeah, and one last, oh, great. Thanks, Tina. And like we were getting at before, we want to use all those powers of art throughout the campaign process, from the greater world we're trying to build to the everyday tactics that we're employing. So let's get into really building a creative campaign.
Yeah, so we're gonna go through the basics, the different terms and what they mean. And unlike activism versus, advocacy, we do have specific definitions for these terms we're gonna go through. But let's put this together. And actually, Alexia, do you think folks need a few minutes of a break? I don't know how y'all usually do these meetings. Would this be a good time though for one?
This is Alexia. Yeah, I think this might be a good spot to just take a few minutes break. So maybe if we come back at is 10 after, is that too long of a break for us to get through the remaining slides?
Sounds great. We'll come back.
I think that works. Let's do 2:10, and then we'll get into building a creative campaign.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks. Welcome back, everyone. This is Krystal again. Hope you enjoyed your little break. And now we are going to continue into building a creative campaign. And as I was saying before our break, we're going to start with the basics and go over some terms. And so to start, when we really think about artistic or creative activism, and really any kind of activism, often what we think are of the tactics. So that might be phone baking, tabling, that performance outside of the school board that Rachel told us about, or the rubber ducks in the potholes. All the examples we showed earlier are tactics. But tactics are just one part of what needs to be a fully creative campaign in order to be successful. And so there are all these other parts, which are a goal, objectives, strategy, and then the tactics come in. So this is what we're going to cover now. And these are all terms you've probably heard before, but a word like strategy or goal can be thrown around and used pretty loosely, and they can kind of lose their meaning. But we, like I mentioned, use them very specifically. So we're going to break them down now so we have a common language that we can use. And so first up is our goal. Our goal is the big thing that's driving us. It's motivating. Our goals are the reason we get up in the morning and do this work. And it's the reason we keep going even when there are setbacks. And a goal is very long term to where we might not ever achieve it in our own lifetime. But it's supposed to be more of like a positive spin, like this utopian vision of the future, and kind of looking at it as there's nothing else to do but this, and it should be very unifying.
Yeah, but because it's Rachel again, because the goal is so far away, it can be hard to know how to approach it. And so the way that we figure out how to get closer to that goal is by setting objectives, which are these concrete steps that we expect to bring us closer to the world that we want to be in. So an example might be that before the next election, we want to register a certain number more voters. And maybe to help us do that, we want to sign up more volunteers. Those are very weak objectives. They would want to be a lot more specific than that, but that's the kind of thing that we mean. So again, objectives are these mile markers on the path to the goal. They're about an outcome, not a to-do list. So if like we take the volunteer example, it's not like I write the volunteer call, I put the volunteer call in these places. It's like what I've achieved, which is signed up 25 more volunteers. They're empowering. They make it possible for me to act because they're more concrete and they're happening close in the next 3 weeks to 6 months. And so we wonder what your objectives are for Disability Voting Rights Week. And I know that that week is still far away. So you might not have all your objectives yet, but if you have any ideas about what they might be, we'd love to hear them, or for you to write them in the chat or even on just a note for yourself, and we'll come back to them later.
Our REV UP coalition is in Virginia. They want to do a candidates forum and a webinar, and the our coalition wants to launch the REV UP Virginia website.
Great. Yeah, those are all great objectives. Great.
Thank you, Mark.
Anyone else have any objectives they want to share?
Is it Alicia or Alicia?
Alicia. My objective that I want to share, even though I live with multiple disabilities, which I didn't have any disabilities till I was 16 when I sustained a left-right traumatic brain injury. And I was familiar with disabilities, but not even close to aware of anything like that. And once I sustained TBI, I was like, okay. It was like acquired this disability, this disability, this disability. And by the time I'm 43, I'm like, okay, I don't want to know what else I'm going to acquire now. And it's like I've encountered people who have so many misconceptions about brain injuries, and especially in the workplace and everywhere else here in Stillwater and in Oklahoma. I'm just kind of like wanting to go, okay, like those with disabilities, we're people first. And just because we have a brain injury doesn't mean that we automatically became mentally retarded. We lost the person who we were. We still are who we are. We're people first. It's like we automatically became someone else once we sustained a brain injury. and everything, and that we can't do this or that. And if we have a severe brain injury, it's like, oh, you're a fragile little child. And it's like, dear Lord, what kind of planet were you born on? And it's like, with the way some people act and everything, I'm going, it makes me want to say, are you sure you're not the one with a brain injury? Because you're making me feel like I'm pretty damn normal right now with the way some people react towards me. And I'm kind of like, I'm feeling really normal right now. So that's what I'm wanting to get across during Disability Awareness Week, is the misconceptions and the realities of brain injuries, and show the realities that we're people first, and we can do what we're capable of, and it's okay to ask us questions.
Okay.
Sometimes we want to be asked questions.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you.
Karen.
So I was just drafting for Disability Week what I wanted for my state, and just visualizing. I want people from each region, north, south, east, west, and central, to come up with groups, to creatively show what their power is. I have it in my mind. The new now, and I love the build an accessible future, power the disability vote. And in my mind, the group from North Alabama, okay, what's your power? Whatever their power is, for them to do a little short clip so we can run it on social media, and then all us come together as one on that Friday. I hope we can meet in Montgomery, since we're central, to have a big convening. That's what I really, really want. What's your power wherever you live, and what are y'all honing in on for this new now? And people have to understand what this new now is, and how it our particular, for those of us who are disabled. And I heard this on another AAPD webinar about using our disability as opportunities. That is something that was so powerful to me. That statement was so powerful to me. And going to DC to lobby for disability rights, meeting people from all over. And I want people to understand we're not weak because we have disabilities. We're not weak. I loved just the previous slide in which Alexia's presentation and her easing, with the people were wearing capes. Ooh, I love that so much. So I think that's very motivating and empowering to people for us.
Yeah. And Karen, I think what you're getting at is almost strategies, which is what we're going to talk about next.
No, thank you, Karen, for sharing all of that. And like Rachel said, and like what Karen, what you were getting at is next is strategies. So let's say we have our goal, we have objectives along the way. Now we need to know though how we want to navigate the journey, how to approach it. And so like some approaches could maybe be like a legal approach, suing to get laws, preventing voter registration overturned, for example. Or we could take a creative approach, like an artistic activism approach. But this is just the beginning. There's a wealth of strategies you can use. For example, these are some strategies we've used in campaigns. The most personal ways to approach our target, the most emotionally appealing ways, the most collaborative ways, the most fame over shame ways, which again was something that Alexia really incorporated into her action. The ways that change the dominant narrative may be your strategy, the ways that demonstrate a better world, and the ways that connect with popular culture. And so strategy, you can look at it as the way you go about reaching the objectives. Your strategies can also be very simple. So some other possible strategies are the fastest way, the cheapest, the easiest, least effortful way, the most polite and respectful way, the most attention-getting way, the most participatory way, and there are so many others. It might be the most surprising way or the most beautiful way, for example. So a strategy, again, is the way, it's the method or approach to navigate the journey, the values guiding our decisions in order to be most effective. And the strategy can span elements or the entire campaign.
And once you have the goal, the specific objectives, and your strategy, then you can come up with the individual tactics that are going to achieve each objective towards achieving your greater goal. The ducks you put in the potholes, the performance outside the school board, et cetera. And so, yeah, the tactics are the individual steps, and they want to adhere to the strategy, and they're very immediate, like you're going to do them in the next couple weeks. And so all together, and you have that goal, you have your objectives, you have your strategy, and then your tactics, you have what we call a certified creative campaign.
And then sometimes though we hear folks come to us and say, I have an awesome idea for something to do, but that's really just thinking about the tactic, and an isolated tactic without articulating a goal or an objective or an overall strategy is not very effective. And it's actually starting from the bottom of the steps to building a creative campaign. So it might be a creative idea, which is awesome, but it might not actually be part of what's going to be a successful creative campaign. So when someone does say, I have an awesome idea for something to do, it's not necessarily a creative campaign. And we would always go back and ask, okay, what are you trying to do though? What's your objective?
And so to get a little bit more advanced and really focus in on objectives, for objectives to really work for you, they need to be what we call SMARTY. And is that an acronym that anyone has heard before? I'm going to guess some of you have, but to go through what it means, the S means that it's specific. So it wants to be really clear what that objective is. The M is for measurable, because you need to know if you've achieved it or not. So there has to be some metric involved. It should be achievable, like within the realm of possibility that you can do it. Some people also have the A standing for ambitious, which is like you do want to push yourself also. The R is for relevant. So whatever the objective is has to be relevant to your greater goal. There needs to be a timeline included. Nothing is going to happen if there's no deadline. And that needs to be inclusive and needs to bring the people who are most effective directly into the process and give them power, and equitable. So it wants to look to fix things at the root level. So going back, yeah, to some examples.
Yeah, and we're going to look at an example again from Alexia's work last year. This was Alexia's goal. Participating in democracy in the US is fully accessible. Disabled voters can choose how they want to vote and can do so privately, independently, and with ease. Such a beautiful goal. And so let's say this is the goal. Here's an example of what a SMARTY objective can be and was for Alexia last year. On November 5th, 2024, Disability Law Center of Virginia's accessibility audits will show that 95% of polling locations across the state have no access barriers.
That's very specific. There's a metric involved at 95%. I don't know, Alexia, if it was achieved or if it's achievable or if it was ambitious, but it is in that realm of possibility. It's relevant to the greater goal. There's a clear date involved there, and it is clearly inclusive and equitable. So that's a really strong, motivating SMARTY objective.
And one thing we like to say to our objectives, we like to think of them as drafts. So it's always a draft objective, things that are living ideas that we want to check back in with often. So you're always going to want to go back throughout your campaign and say, like, let's take a look at our SMARTY objective. How are we doing? Is there anything we need to shift or change depending on what's going on?
Another way you can look at it is to pretend that you have that your objective is a wish to an all-powerful genie, and the genie is going to give you only exactly what you ask for. And so you can't leave any blanks or any ambiguity because the genie will undermine you. So there's like a joke way to think about this of, say there's a kid who comes upon a genie walking home from school, hard day at school, failed their math test. And the genie is like, I grant you 3 wishes. And the kid is so excited and says, great, well, my first wish is that you get rid of math. And the genie says, great, your wish is granted, math is gone. And then the kid says, great, so now I have 2 more wishes, right? And the genie says, what's 2? Because they've gotten rid of math. So a SMARTY objective version of that would be like, if we go back to like Alexia's SMARTY objective, if there wasn't, say that the date wasn't in there. And so Alexia just said, I want the Disability Law Center of Virginia to show that 95% of polling locations across the state have no access barriers. The genie could say, great, your wish is granted. That's going to happen in the year 2224. And it's like, well, that's not going to help anyone, you know? So you want to make a genie-proof objective.
Yeah, and so we want to give you some time to make a genie-proof objective. And you can do this together in breakout rooms. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Rachel.
So I think we're putting you back in the same breakout rooms. And yes, I'm getting nods from Alexia. And if one of you has an objective, you'll share what that wish is. And then the other folks in the room are to be the evil genies and try to find all of the holes in your objective so that when we come out of the breakout rooms, we'll have stronger SMARTY objectives. And we're just going to do that for a few minutes.
This is Alexia.
Go ahead.
Do we want to come back at what time do you want to come back? I guess I should ask.
35. It's going to be fast.
2:35? Okay.
Yeah. Sounds good. I think a couple people might be in different rooms, but it's largely the same rooms.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, this is April, just setting captions back up. And captions are good to go.
This is Rachel again. I know that was very quick, but if anyone wants to share anything about how that went, we'll have a little time for that.
Yeah, and I'll just add this is Krystal speaking, and I'll just add we didn't have enough time in our breakout room to totally flesh out a full SMARTY objective, but there was great work being done on it, and so this is something you can continue to do with each other and amongst your teams to SMARTify and genie proof your objectives.
Alicia, I see your hand.
I don't know how many in the group is traumatic brain injury like me, but one thing I want to do during the Disability Voting Rights Week is to show not necessarily the differences and make the assumption or whatever that, okay, disability and TBI is different and separate two categories or whatever, but show how, the assumptions and everything and how they can be similar and the two groups can work together and everything, and changing assumptions and everything. And in the group, I got help with bringing since it's kind of hard with cognitive thinking sometimes, I got help with bringing everything together, because it's sometimes really hard for me to think, because the part of my brain that got affected was the left right, which means I really got screwed up in the thinking department when my brain injury happened. So sometimes when it comes to thinking, I'm like, people help me think. So I really got help, and thank you to everyone in the group.
Okay. Thanks, Alicia. So we really emphasize this objective content, and if you're wondering why, it's because of these reasons. One is that it just makes what we're trying to do real. Like, the stakes are so high, the barriers are so high, but if we can break this down into sort of these achievable steps that are really clear, it makes it all much more possible. Also, like, having this sentence or two about what you're trying to achieve makes it really clear for yourself about what you should be focused on. It also makes it really clear for other people about what you're all aiming for. And a really good objective is like really motivating. Like, if I go to Krystal and she's working on a new project and she's like, this is the objective, and it's a real strong Smarty objective, it's exciting, right? It's like, I trust that she knows what she's doing. I want to be part of it. And then it helps you measure progress, because a Smarty objective has that measurable element. It helps you measure progress so that you know if you're succeeding or not. There are a couple other ways that you can strengthen objectives that I can go through quickly, Krystal, if you want.
Yeah,
So,
great.
very cool. So one is that make sure your objective isn't too big. You might want to break it down into smaller parts and have lots of different objectives. Like, say you're hoping to win an election, that's huge. That might be more of a goal. So what's like the first thing? One is to sign up supporters or do something else, Another might be, if you're like just starting out of a campaign, you might want to start with a win so that people feel really good. People need to feel like winning is possible right now, and a lot of us don't. And so if your first objective is just to get like 10 people to join a meeting, then maybe that's the way for everyone involved to feel like there's momentum. And you also like always want to celebrate if you've achieved an objective, and it can be these smaller things like holding a cookout or publishing a letter to the editor and just showing that things are possible, getting people on your side. Yeah, make sure that it is an outcome or an achievement that you can measure. Sometimes it can be helpful to do that if you write it in the past tense. So if you're like, it's September 13th, 2025, and we had 500 libraries all over the United States promote voting access at the polls. That's probably not a good objective, but something like that. It's you're writing it in the future, like you've achieved it. And the other thing that it can be really hard is you want to take strategy and tactics out of your objectives as much as possible and be really pure about what you want to achieve. And the reason that you do that is that it gives you more options. So there's so many tactics and strategies that we're used to doing. And so you might think an objective is to like run 5 tabling events or to hold a rally in front of City Hall. But like, what do you actually want to achieve? And do you need to do it the way you've done it before? Like, if you always do a rally, do you need to do another rally? What do you really want to achieve? You want to get your city council member to acknowledge something? Then think of other ways that you can do that. Or like, just be really clear about what it is you're trying to achieve, so you're not putting all of your energy into something that isn't really getting at your outcome. Yeah, and then sometimes you want to keep things in your control. No matter how good you are, you might not get like a mayor to sign a bill, or Shane in my breakout room was trying to get people in the Pennsylvania legislature to understand Medicaid. But what you can do is make like 5 points of contact with them, something like that. And then always make sure that your objective answers the so what test. So if maybe you think you have an objective to get like 100 likes on social media, just ask so what? Like, is that really going to achieve what you need? Is that really tied to a greater objective that's going to advance your goal? It might be, like, maybe actually getting those likes on social media does, but just make sure your objective passes that so what test. Yeah, and just keep revising that objective.
Yeah, and then excuse me. This is Krystal, and I know we are coming close to time, but we do want to touch on audiences, and how to really reach the folks that you want to reach, especially as you're thinking about your Disability Voting Rights Week this year. And we have an exercise to help you brainstorm audiences and to think about, who do I want to come to my action? And so you actually create what we call an audience persona. You give this person a name, age, and other demographic info. You decide what they like to do with their time. What do they love? What do they want to change? And what are their barriers? And so when you do an audience persona, we ask that you get really specific and you also like get funny and silly with it. But it might be that my audience persona is a mom who cares about voting, but doesn't have time to do anything because they're a mom, or a progressive college student active on other issues, but not this particular issue that I want them to be involved in. But you really do like choose a name, you can draw a picture of them, decide if they like a particular show that's popular right now, or maybe they like a particular sport. And you ask things like what you ask questions like why do they like these things and how can I compete with those things? Alexia, to call on you again, we would love if you wouldn't mind sharing about your audience persona that you created in your work last year.
Yeah, this is Alexia. I um, found this activity actually really helpful, even though I thought it was just kind of silly at first. And so when I was thinking about how to get poll workers who are really overwhelmed and really responsible for a lot, and they have long days, and I was trying to think about how do I get them to care about accessibility. For my audience, I invented Ray, who was a 64-year-old white man. He is extremely passionate about being a poll worker and has served in every election since Jimmy Carter was in office. I imagine that he's so passionate that he's the first person there at 5 a.m. on election day, and he's the last to leave at 9 p.m. His favorite station to work is checking people in because he likes talking to voters. And then I also decided to give him a pet gecko because that sounds fun, and I wanted to give him some personality. He's a big fan of Bob Evans frozen meals. He likes things to be easy but also delicious. Who doesn't? And he's technically part of the disability community because as he's aged, he's developed some mobility issues, but he would never identify as disabled, and he does not have a lot of understanding of access, and he doesn't even use a mobility aid himself, even though he could benefit from it. We all know these people in our lives. And he is also really wants to see the younger generation more civically engaged. So when I thought of Ray, my tactic of using the comic books and appealing to pride kind of came more into view because I was like, you know, I myself am a poll worker, and so I know these people like Ray who are like diehard civically engaged, and they feel so much pride. And that's how I came to be really attached to thinking about this fame over shame approach. Is that good, Chris? Do you want me to add anything else?
No, that's great. Thank you so much for introducing us to Ray, Alexia. And again, I know we're getting close to time, but we would love for y'all to go back into your breakout rooms and just maybe even start your audience persona. Again, it's something you can continue with your team or on your own. But we'll have you get into the breakout rooms for maybe 5 minutes again and start working on your audience persona. And if you have questions, you can talk it through. Rachel put in the chat the things that you want to use to create your audience persona. So their name, age, demographic info, what they do with their time, what do they love, what do they want to change, and what are their barriers.
Well, we really just scratched the surface. This is Rachel again. I was in the middle of shouting audience ideas at the people in my breakout room. But lucky for you, we're going to share some resources where you can learn a lot more about all of this. Just to recap what we did in what felt like a very quick 2 hours, we started with your really wonderful, inspiring curb cut stories, your activism origin stories. We shared some of our favorite examples of creative actions. We heard some of your amazing examples of creative actions. We got into the parts of a creative campaign, and we started thinking about audiences. And now we're going to get resources. Oops, sorry about the grammar in that. Yeah. So we have a book and a toolkit. Krystal, did you want to talk about those?
Yeah, so I'm going to put these links in the chat. We'll also share them in follow-up materials. But we have a book that's written by our co-founders who are named Steve and Steve, and it's called The Art of Activism. And then we also have a really great toolkit called Unleashing Unstoppable Voters. It's a creative campaign toolkit that it kind of covers some of these exercises we did today and so much more. Both the book and toolkit are full of more case studies, examples of artistic activism, different lessons and activities, exercises you can do individually or with a team. Just so much more on how to build your creative campaign and what we call like how to make the impossible possible. The links are in the chat, and the toolkit, you can download a digital copy for free. We also are available for you. I mean, we want to say thank you, but these are our emails up here. We'll put them in the chat as well. But we would love to stay connected and hear about all your plans for Disability Voting Rights Week. If you want to run something by us, let us know. We have open office hours the last Friday of every month at the center. And we'd just love to stay connected and hear about everything you're doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Alexia. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and we hope to see you on the next call. I will send out the slides, the recording, Rachel and Krystal's emails, and I definitely encourage you to take them up on joining their office hours to talk through ideas. But yeah, thank you all so much. Have a good rest of your Wednesday.